They dumped a full fire extinguisher of the orange powder on a yellow powder, whatever that was, and I remember just taking it outside, hosing all the boards off, and they actually worked. The power supply, high voltage power supply, was dead, and at that point the game had proven itself, but I needed the money, so I got an old TV set it on top of the arcade, ran the 19 kilovolts out the back of the TV into my game, and kept going. I'll hurry up here. A couple of months later, I met somebody from Midway at some game conference somewhere near here, and he was interested enough to come back to Berkeley to look at my game. He talked about a 1% royalty. I wasn't thrilled about that. A few months later, I went to talk to him again in Chicago, took my system with me, and he said, "We'll give you 0.5%. I looked at your patents, I can get around them. I was going to go up, not down." And my only comment at that point was, "Can I have a ride to the airport?" And during that time, I was carrying my suitcase game around. By the end of the summer, I found myself talking to people at Cinematronics. What I didn't realize at the time how small the company was. And I basically became the engineering department. When the game finally made it to arcade, it was a hit. The only problem was Cinematronics couldn't build them fast enough. If I'd gone with Midway at their 0.5%, I would have made more money. But it was... If I got to Midway, here it is, it'd be out of my hands. It's fun being in a small company, still being in control of the whole project. Even though I was making very good money in royalties, I had a desire to run my own company. Thus Vectorbeam came about. It was crazy. Wait. Oh, there's more than the question. At one point I was interviewed by somebody from a local TV station. I was asked what our sales were at Vectorbeam Factory. Things are quite slow. I wasn't going to say what the sales were, but I did say if we were running at full capacity, and I emphasized if we were running at full capacity, we would have had sales of $15 million a year. The next day, the phone was ringing off the hook, people with all these sob stories asking me for money. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, after that, continue. Okay, questions.
We've got how much time for questions?
We have 10 minutes total.
Okay, so if you want to raise your hand and we'll just call on whomever might have questions.
I guess I answered them all.
All right there in front.
What are you doing now?
Now?
What are you up to now? Yeah.
Hold on a second. After a Vectorbeam, I spent a number of years trying to develop games myself. The last game I worked on, or actually that board there, used a Motorola 68000 to drive it. I used somebody else's C. I used a C compiler that was a real dog, and I said I can build better development tools than this. I went off and spent the next 10 years writing a C compiler for the Motorola 68000. After that, again, took a few years off and said, let me do something simple. I'm going to work on a key finding device. You lose your keys. This will help you find them. And that's taken on a life of its own for the last 12 years. It took 2 days to get a working prototype, and I'm still trying to perfect it. Say you had your keys, you lost them somewhere, you didn't know where they were. Under ideal conditions, quiet and so forth. I've tested these up to 500 feet. The reason you heard it getting louder and louder and louder was I'm afraid that if it goes off at full volume right away, it's going to startle somebody and they're going to sue me. So that's why it gradually gets louder.
So it looks like we have another question.
This is what I'm doing right now.
He asked if the suitcase works.
The suitcase, I just assume it works.
Question in the back.
I'm not going to waste my time.
Also regarding the suitcase, if you had to program that thing and your life depended on it, could you still do it?
If my life depended on it? Yes.
Depends on the program.
I've got the programs that
Right, good.
Well, speaking of programming, were you designing the ice on the fly, or did you have an instruction set you kind of started with as a guide, or how did you come up with your final ISO?
I knew I had to add, and I had to branch, and I had to do comparisons, and I started building.
And your data types are what? What are your widths of your?
Okay, I mean, the instruction set evolved as the computer was built. What was your question? What was the second part?
The data types.
Is it all? It's all integer, right?
Oh, yeah, everything is integer.
8-bit or 12 or?
Okay. This machine has 4K by 12 bits of read-only program memory, and it also has, 4K by 8 program memory, and has 256 12-bit RAM locations. So the program memory and the data memory were separate, and I didn't realize it at the time, but 10 years later I discovered I had a Harvard architecture machine here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Over there.
Do you have any game ideas from back then that weren't realizable because of the technology limitations that you could make tomorrow if you chose to? And if so, when can we play it?
The answer is no. If I had some game ideas, I would never have sold Vectorbeam.
You were saying it was harder than it looks.
It's harder than it looks.
But designing games is even more fun than playing them.
Oh, yes. I enjoy doing the hardware, the programming. I can spend a few minutes at a time playing this game. It's not that exciting. I enjoy building it. And as far as building it, okay, back then, a number of people could do a whole game. That's impossible today. Today, game development has $200 million development, hundreds of people involved. And even back then, probably not very many people could have done what I did. The digital hardware, the analog hardware, the programming. I'm probably the only one in the world who ever did it. Some people have done the logic interfacing to a TV screen, but there's no analog involved. But all three, I'm probably the only one.
Larry, thank you for coming out and talking to us.